It's hard to relate how unexpected a remaster of The Secret of Monkey Island actually was back when it was first announced. At a time when LucasArts had a tendency to treat classic properties like red-headed stepchildren, there seemed to be no chance it would ever get touched again. And yet, 19 years after it first came out, they decided to revamp what's considered by many as one of the all-time classics of the genre. An HD graphical overhaul, remastered music, the addition of voice acting, and a hint system, not to mention the ability to swap between classic and special modes on the fly. I fear that I got so caught up in the magic of the event that I didn't really stop to critique the remaster itself, although this was years before I started reviewing games and God knows what I did with all that spare time. Monkey Island Special Edition was one of the first HD remasters I remember seeing, and with that comes some teething troubles. Let's get into it and find out what they screwed up. I'll tackle the most obvious change first, the graphics. The classic mode looks like this, the latest VGA version of Monkey that came out. That means icons for inventory, no turn on or turn off verbs, and the stump joke has been excised, more's the pity. When I talked about Day of the Tentacle Remastered, I noted that the upscale type of remaster wouldn't have worked here. Day of the Tentacle had its own distinct and timeless art style, whereas Monkey looked like a generic VGA game from the 90s. So the art style had to change, no question. What some people took issue with was the art style that replaced the original. I guess it was something of a painted look they were going for, but I like that they kept and even expanded on some of the slightly wacky off-kilter designs, whilst adding a lot of detail and new foreground elements. Character design is very much open to interpretation, not helped by Guybrush's hair retcon in between games. These designs can come off as caricatures, although in the case of Stan the Used Boat Salesman that actually fits. Thing is, it's not the art style I have a problem with, it doesn't offend me like it has some others. Apart from the backgrounds that were blatantly unfinished, I mean, those look like JPEG artifacts to me. Particularly bad is this one here, because that's the background for the insult sword fighting, and you're going to see that again and again as you build up your dictionary of word warfare. I can't picture the 19th anniversary being an event so goddamn epic that they'd have to rush development to get the game out in time, and even then, this is something you're going to see way more than most, so there is no excuse for this. So I don't really dislike the graphics unless they're, quite blatantly fucked. But what irks my balls far more isn't the art style, it's the animation. Supposedly Speciality Edition runs an implementation of the original game with all the fancy stuff put on top, and the animation makes me believe that claim fully. Classic mode shows the game as it was, in what must be no more than 15 frames per second. Apart from the background scrolling and some interpolation on character movement, that's how Specialist Edition mode runs too. Guybrush looks like he's gliding across Melee Island doing a reverse moonwalk, which is something so pointless I didn't even think it was possible. This looks cheap as hell, and would have been laughed out of the metaphorical building if it were its own game rather than a remaster of something 19 years old. There's even times when the attempts to compensate for the low frame rate backfire entirely, like when you're on this zip line. The original code was clearly teleporting Guybrush between certain points, which looks fine when you take the lower frame rate into account. It was never meant to be interpolated and makes him look like he has the agility of a claw machine. How anyone could have thought this was okay is beyond me. It looks like a half-assed Flash animation from 2001. Hell, I've half-assed better Flash animation than that. This type of heresy was much improved when the special edition to LeChuck's Revenge the next year, but we'll get to that another day. Our next teething trouble is the interface. Instead of displaying the verb inventory bar front and centre, we have a full screen interface. To start with, what was there before is here now. Left click to walk, right click to do whatever the default action for the highlighted object is. Talk for peoples, use for switches, etc. From there, you have some options. Hitting control brings up a verb box, hitting alt brings up an inventory box, and you can show them independent of one another. I'd quite like it if the inventory box didn't automatically disappear when you verb an item, but that might just be me. Alternatively, you can use the mouse wheel to scroll through all 9 verbs, which is only marginally better than Sierra's old method of making you right click through the whole damn lot. That said, the developers did put effort into keeping some key moments intact despite the new interface, like the verb sentence gags when you're in the governor's mansion, or putting an indicator on screen for a certain grog-related puzzle. I'm getting dangerously close to praising the game for being competent, but I gotta work with what I have here, A hint system is also included, which couldn't be simpler. Press H, hint appears. Press H more times and progressively more specific hints will appear until it straight up gives you the solution. Good in theory, but I hope you wrote down that first hint the game gave you because you won't get it back. By pressing H again, you risk spoiling the next puzzle for yourself. Good first step, but more could have been done. Final category of interface land is the dialogue, and that's my cue to lay out a side that the native tribes of Peru could probably hear. Good news is that almost everything from the SCUM interface works, including the keyboard shortcuts for verbs. Bad news is long and multifaceted. First, no mouse wheel support. You can blatantly use the mouse wheel for verb picking, so why not when you have a big list of replies to go through? It's not like you don't support the mouse wheel as a feature. It doesn't work in the inventory either, but letting you pick verbs has a use there. For dialogue, There's no need. You could easily use the mouse wheel to scroll instead. Second, you can skip individual lines of dialogue with the period key in classic mode and classic mode only. Dumb, dumb, deeper and dumb. Third, number key shortcuts for lines of dialogue are amazingly inconsistent. In one conversation you can press 2 to pick the second dialogue choice, and in the next conversation that same number key will pick the third option instead. Swap back to classic mode for a second and you'll see that the dialogue choices are in a different order. This is supposedly running the original game under the HD fancies, and yet the dialogue choices swap places? I cannot fathom how exactly you fuck that up. Cannot even. It would be like you were trying to code a Hello World program and you burnt your house down. Okay, I'm hyperbolizing a little, but this is silly on a stick. Finally, there's the audio, and perhaps the chance to veer away from ranting at last. Why start now? Ha 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 ha. The music, as remake and remaster tradition seems to mandate, is good. I'd rather they used a wind instrument for the melody of the main theme rather than a xylophone, but that's my one obligatory nitpick of the episode. I can't promise it's an actual real person orchestral performance, but it does the job very well. That didn't give me much to talk about. I'll nip over to voice acting instead. We've got all new dialogue recorded for this one, with Dominic Armato, Alexandra Boyd and Earl Bowen reprising the roles of Guybrush, Elaine and LeChuck respectively. The definitive cast if you ask me. Even the voice of the Voodoo Lady is the same as Curse of Monkey Island onwards, as well as the voice of Otis from Escape from Monkey Island, even if that association does make me a little bit sad. Still, going the extra mile and having actors reprise their roles did give me smiles. One nice voice acting related surprise came during the insult sword fighting. If you pick the right response to an insult, Guybrush sounds goofily confident, as you'd expect. If you pick the wrong response, he sounds unsure when he's delivering it. It's a clever little touch, worth re-recording every insult response twice for. What wasn't such a nice surprise is that the voices don't play in classic mode, only in Super Mega Sexy Special HD mode. I would have absolutely loved to play with classic graphics and voice acting, but tough titties apparently. Yet another thing that the spatial edition of LeChuck's Revenge sorted out, but again, I'll get to it. Aside from the main roles, there's not much to mention. Pirates sound like pirates, narrator is deep and booming, much what you'd expect. And while I'm on the competent stuff, I'm going to give a nod to the ambient sound design. A surprisingly high number of scenes in Monkey Island have little or no noise in the background. 1990, limited resources, remember? And Specky Edition adds a lot to those scenes, such as waves gently crashing, crickets chirping, seagulls sounding the end times with their terrifying death squawk, little touches like that. Now, recommending the special edition to people is awkward. I don't want to show support given how unfinished and janky it can sometimes get, but that's not exactly what your average consumer cares about. Then again, maybe average consumers aren't watching this, it would explain the numbers at least. A sweeping recommendation to download ScumVM and play it that way probably isn't the best either, especially when you can't buy that version legally. And it looks like this. As much as it hurts my heart to see it, it doesn't look great, it's not aged well. If the Speedometer edition had given us classic graphics and voice acting, I could at least recommend that, but they didn't, so I can't. So which one do I pick? Neither, because somebody made a version with classic graphics and voice acting. Yes, if you have Monkey Island Suspenseful Edition, you can build yourself a classic talkie version, add it into ScumVM, and you're away. It's a slightly technical process and it takes a while to extract all the resources, but once it's done, you have classic mode with voices. You can even add the close-up of Spiffy from Spoopy Edition if you want. So yeah, I'm going to recommend that version instead, which ironically means I'm recommending you buy the version I just spent 10 odd minutes ranting about, but apart from ScumVM and this small download, that's all you need. So that's my recommendation. Monkey Island Ultimate Talkie Edition. Turns out it's what I wanted all along.